let's create a retention policy. Now there are two ways of doing this. Let's do the legacy manner first. So I'm going to go to a SharePoint site, and let's go to SharePoint Admin and SharePoint. I'm going to go to the HQ site here. Now in the HQ site we have several different libraries, and I'm going to pick the holiday request. So we've got a couple of different documents in here, but what kind of content are they? Because I'm going to attach a policy for content. Let's go up to the cog and down to the list settings. Now when the list settings opens up, information management policy settings is here. We're going to select that, and we're going to base this on items in here. So I'm going to go item, click through that, and it's spinning, and I'm going to set a policy statement. And I'm going to enable retention. Now in half a second I'm going to get a little pop-up here, and you can see it's spinning, that it allows me to add a retention stage. And I'm going to be basing this on the date it was created. If it sat here for 3 years, what would you like to do with it? Now take note, there are only 8 things. Move to the recycle bin. So eventually it would age out of the recycle bin, or permanently delete it, or I could choose to transfer it to another location. Little caveat there, you have to have a registered location. Well, what is a registered location? That's a record center. Currently in our online environment we have not created that, so we can't do that. We could start a workflow. We could skip to another stage if this was part of a workflow. We could declare it a record. And actually, I'm going to select declare it a record. So if something has sat here for 3 years, up until that point it is still deletable, it is still editable, but at 3 years past the created date, it will become a permanent record. Now, you can change these. Notice, I could say after 2 days. And actually, we're going to do that. This is a proof of concept. Let's set this to 2 days. And I'm going to say OK. And I'm going to say OK. Now it is spinning. It is creating this policy. And then we're going to go back to the settings and back up to our holiday request. Now within our holiday request, we already had these elements in there. Once we set the policy, it doesn't go back and look at these elements. These really would have already been marked as a permanent record. But if I were to put something new in here, within those many days, it would be a permanent record. Now that's the legacy way of doing it. Adding an information management policy to the content. Now we did it here at this specific library, but you could establish an information management policy at the root site and attach it to a content type. It would be exactly the same procedure. Now we could create a site policy as well. But introduced in the new online was the ability to use the Security and Compliance Center to set a retention policy. So let's go have a look at that one. So here we are, Security and Compliance, and under Classification, Retention Labels. Now I have already created some retention labels in here. So collaboration documents, they'll be kept for 6 months. Temp documents, 3 years. Long-term documents, 7 years. Now I'm going to create another label. And I'm going to call this Contracts. And the description is identify record management for awarded contracts. And a description for the users, that's only informational. We'll say next. Now, no reference ID. As far as business function, we'll call it legal. Right? No category or authority type or provision or citation. Not necessarily. All right? We really don't need any of those. Users can label their own content. And we're going to say next. Right. Now, do I want to apply the retention? Yes, I do. Now, to what? So, when we assign this, after 7 years, we want to do something. Now, we're going to trigger a disposition review, and we're going to notify people. And I'm going to notify the global administrator that it needs a review. And it's based upon when it was created. Now, classify content as a record with this label. And I'm going to say next. So this is a brief description. Now remember, it's going to be called contracts, and we're going to create the label. It's a retention label. We'll wait a moment here. Now when it is done, and this one seems to be taking quite a bit, we'll actually go to see how it's used. I think I'll pause until this is done. Now we can see that it has been completed, but now we're not done because we've created it, but we have to publish it. So let's publish these. And which labels do we want to publish? Don't republish labels. Select the one that's new and publish just that one. So we're going to choose the labels to publish. We're going to add a label. We're going to find our contracts, add it, and we're done selecting. And this is what it's called. Now, where will the label apply? Notice we have choices here. Right? I'm going to choose specific locations. Now, with Exchange, I can specify recipients, SharePoint. Notice I can choose sites, or I can exclude sites. Notice the default is all. And OneDrive, the default is all. And Office 365 Groups, it is all. And let's just say next. What are we going to call this? We're going to call this contract retention. And that's the label. And take note, up to 1 day. Up to. But it may take less time. And we're going to publish those labels out. Alright, so we actually, if you look at this list, we have a collaboration document, a temp document, long-term, and a contracts. They're all ready. Now let's see if we can use them. Contracts may not appear, but the other ones should already be here. Now I'm going to go to my SharePoint site. And I'm going to go into one of my locations here. I think I'll go to HQ Communications. Right. And in here, we have documents. Now I'm going to upload a document. And actually, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a drag and a drop here. I'm going to find a Word document. And I'll put a Word document over there. So I just arbitrarily picked 2 Word documents that I had here. And they're just normal. But is there a policy that I can apply to mark them as a label? Or to label them, excuse me. Well, let's select one. And let's go down to details. And I do have retention label here. And notice there are the 3 that were already there. They don't have listed the one that I just made, but it did say it could take up to a day. So I could set that. And all I did was use the ellipse, and I could go to details and add the label. Now that's in there. If I use the ellipse and I go to more and I go to compliance details, is it there in compliance details? Well, it doesn't specify it here unless you scroll down, and then it says that it's a long-term document. Can we actually have here a column that will show that? Well, let's go see. Let's use this add a column. And there's more. We'll wait for a minute. It's spinning. We could create one. But we don't want to create one, do we? Because it's something that's inherent in the system. So let's go show hide. And let's scroll down. Retention label. And I could do retention label applied. But retention label works. So we could add that. And that was the show hide. And just find retention label and apply that so that we can see the retention label. And that's the end of retention labels.